Thank you, Professor Čular. Just to put up my presentation. Here we are. It's great to be here. Thanks for the organizers for the invitation, and so far very interesting presentations and discussions. I'll try to keep it really short, even below 12 minutes. I don't have an empirical paper. I will present on a start of a research. Zlatko mentioned that there will be an upgrade of the project that they have done previously. One of the upgrades will be Macedonia, and looking at IPD in Macedonia. So this is my tentative kind of research outline, so to say. I will show you what has been done until now on inter-party democracy in Macedonia. There are some diverging or different results which bring us an empirical puzzle. I will shortly discuss tentative hypotheses, then why I think there are these divergences in the result based on conceptual divergences, and I'll try to present a parsimonious approach to how we will try to tackle the research with Zlatko in the upgrading. So these are the two studies that have been done so far in Macedonia, one in 2007, published in a book edited by Georgi Karasimonov, and the other one is done in 2011 with Daskalovsky. They have a different measurement system, but they should convey. We spoke about different approaches to studying same phenomenon in political science over the coffee break, but if they show different results, then this brings forth a puzzle. So these are the four main political parties in Macedonia. The one study shows, or the second study shows that these two parties, which are the two biggest and central parties of the right and left, are on the same level of intra-party democracy, and these are the two main parties representing ethnic Albanians, which have equally the same level of intra-party democracy. So the empirical puzzle is how come that this political party, VMRO-DPMN, which is the right conservative party in 2011, has the same level of intra-party democracy and in 2011. So, the tentative hypothesis, it could be the institutional variables, but throughout this period they have been constant, not to go into them, but we can go in the discussion, the electoral regime, insignificant changes in party regulation, the party system, both the format and dynamics have stayed the same, so we have a constant institutional environment then. There have been some changes in terms of temporal changes in statutes and practices that we'll need to look further, whether this influence. There have been some changes possible in self-identified ideological position, not so much in the proclaimants of the ideological position, but of the policies being pursued. For the last 10 years, we had a right conservative government, I would even say, quite nationalist and authoritarian, but a large set of policies that it's implementing and pushing forward are very socially sensitive or aware. So whether this, changes in the ideological policy framework has had any influences, and whether there are these changes that from the first to the second study there were changes in the parties in terms of one being in opposition and the other in the government, whether this has impacted the intra-party situation. But I think what is more important is to look at the conceptual divergence in between these two studies, how they define intra-party democracy. For Georgiev and Karasimonov, it is the democratic and transparent procedures and the practices that need to be developed and maintained at every level. And on the other side, so it's about procedures and practices, and that's the intra-party democracy for Karasimonov. And for Daskalovsky and Sekov, when they say intra-party democracy, they mean the democratic principles in organization and effective inclusion and in decision-making and policy creation. So it's about the organization and inclusion. They both look at the same, more or less, sources of empirics, party statute, which is a very typical point, or not a point of departure, but very typical source of empirical data for measuring party democracy. I will look at it, more critically in the next slide. Even though Daskalovsky and Sekov also take some secondary material like studies, articles, and variety of media sources. So these are the divergence in operationalization and measurement. Karasimonov has developed this 6 items scale, looking at the right of party members, nominating candidates for public office, electing the party leader, if the local party body is autonomous, the opportunity for party members to take part in the formation, and if there are horizontal structures. And the Skalovsky and Sekov have this very complicated matrix, so to say, where they have 3 dimensions: general level of democracy, breakdown in 4, let's say, in not even indicators, but 4 actual indicators, and they also have 8 questions that they ask connected to what is the state of general level of democracy and what is the state of all these 4 issues. And they also have a second dimension, autonomy of local branches and relations to the central and local branches. And the third dimension is democracy and elections. And again, you see here 4 issues. Then again, here there are 2 issues in the other dimension. So I find, that there is this conceptual obfuscation, so to say, which is then contributing possibly to the variance in the results. For example, the Karasimonov scale does not even discuss if there is hierarchy of the items, what matters more or less. There is lack of conceptualization. They are all put together, they are not, so how do they actually contribute to intra-party democracy? And I feel, that some of the items some are more general than the others, so including all these items is really stretching the concept, and there are problems with the validity and reliability of results actually of the both studies. They are done by the end results of the measurement are the opinions of single experts that have conducted the studies, which is, very weak in terms of checking the reliability of the findings. And the Skalovsky and Sekov, again, they have a lot of unclear criteria for the grouping. There is, as I said, very problematic operationalization and measurement, too complicated, not explaining why, and there is a lot of repetition and interdependence within the items, where they mention twice competencies and prerogative of party presidents in 2 different kind of dimensions. So in conclusion, I think that, when we should start the research, and this is in a month or so, we need to go back to the blackboard and try to discuss and conceptualize a more parsimonious approach. And I think a good point of departure would be what has been proposed by Susan Scarrow and also by Goran Čular. Susan Scarrow proposes to look at these 3 dimensions, which is inclusion, autonomy, and institutionalization, while as the Čular proposal is to look at autonomy and inclusion, which is the vertical and horizontal axis within the political parties. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll just raise a question at the end of this presentation. But whatever it seems that people are doing when trying to measure intra-party democracies is mainly looking at the party statutes, right? And I'm wondering whether this is sufficient. And obvious, the easy answer is no, it's not sufficient. It's all about the practices. But then how do you investigate that, and how do you measure and how do you research intra-party practices? And somebody mentioned the secret garden of intra-party competition. Well, this is the secret, the secret of the secrets of the the intra-party practices, how to develop, how to share or not share or control power. So I don't have a clear answer to that as to the first question: are party status sufficient? But